Welcome back. The current year's growth expectations for Nigeria, Africa's largest economy, has once again been revised downwards by the International Monetary Fund. Now, according to the World Economic Report released on Tuesday by the Washington-based organization, Nigeria's economy will probably contract by 1.8% this year, slashing a 2.3% growth estimate. So, with the global economy bleeding, is Nigeria totally immune from what's happening on the global space? Should there be a state of emergency declared on Nigeria's economy? Dr. Biodun Adedipe, an economist and the CEO of B. Adedipe Associates, joins me now as we take a look at these issues and probably come up with some solutions. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining me on the program.
It's my pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me.
So the IMF report says the global economy is bleeding. First off, is Nigeria totally immune to what's happening on a global scale?
Well, certainly we are not, because we are part of the global economy. And whatever happens elsewhere affects us. And interestingly too, whatever happens here affects the rest of the world, because it's an interconnected world we live in today. So to that extent, I would say that we are not immune to what is happening globally, which in fact is in context of what the IMF issued in its report yesterday. The outcome of Brexit, which even though now is still uncertain, but clearly anyone having either a direct relationship with Britain or indirect through any of its trade partners certainly will be affected. So that is what we are seeing playing out here. But again, we have our own peculiarities, which the IMF specified in that report.
Yes.
So basically, we are not immune.
So the IMF actually blames most of the issues on adjustments for foreign exchange shortages, low electricity generation, and weak investors' confidence. That's the IMF. What we see is a contraction in our GDP. What we see is an increase in inflation rate. It's currently at 6.48%. What we also see is forex challenges, still in line with what the IMF has said. Is this a time to declare a state of emergency on the economy?
Well, it's a question I will put simply as, why state of emergency? Now, if we talk about declaring one today, it means we are saying we've just come to a point where we realize that things are not working the way they are supposed to work. But really, if you look closely at the macroeconomic statistics, this economy began to slow down as far back as first quarter of 2013, not just now. So in which case, talking about a state of emergency, I would say, is an issue that is neither here nor there. Really, it's more to say that what should Nigeria be doing at this time? Because we can declare a state of emergency and still not do what we are supposed to do. And I also want to put the IMF, projection in context as well. Now, a projection comes out of macroeconomic forecast, and that comes from a model that you design based on certain assumptions. Now, when you throw statistics and of course some other assumptions into your variables, you get a certain result that puts the economy in the shape of, if we do A, B, and C, then we get D as our answer. But we all know that human behavior never follows a trajectory. Now you can say for certainty that's the way it's going to be, which is what we call in finance the random walk hypothesis, which is simply to say that, look, it's a projection. So it is not in the sense that Nigeria will find herself in that position at the end of the year. But we should take it as a warning to begin to act in the right direction, which means certain things need to change. And that means we need to reform. And of course, part of that also, we'll put it this way, we need to transform with integrity.
But you see, the IMF, in its last Article 4 consultation report,
yes, in April,
advised that Nigeria should be looking more at easing forex restriction. This time last year, we were talking about forex tightening, which was stifling businesses. And a lot of people were pushing for the Naira to be floated.
That's right.
Now we have the Naira floated. We have the interbank foreign exchange market trading, and we have the Naira settled over-the-counter market as well. So all of this was on the advice issued by IMF among other international. So why is it that even in spite of that easing in forex, issues, we still have the IMF saying that we probably will contract 1.8%, even though it's already very glaring that that's what will likely happen?
Yeah. Now, for me as an analyst, I would say the direction we went with the flexible exchange rate was a mistake, and I say that with every sense of responsibility here. Looking historically at what we have done with managing the exchange value of our currency, there has never been a time with the value of the naira that this economy benefited from it because of the structure of the economy. Now, the policies you adopt should be a reflection of the structure and where you want to take it to. Now, if all these decades, let me say since the mid-1970s, our economy has largely depended on foreign earnings from hydrocarbons and also government revenue for that. And we have seen clearly that we suffered a lot from what is commonly called in economics the dot disease. The dot disease means you depend on almost one product for most of your earnings, and then when the earnings come in also, you don't spend it wisely. So you spend like a drunken sailor. So which means this very source you depend on is not renewable, and you are not even spending it wisely. That is what we have lived in all these years, and in fact decades. So now, that defect, if it will be corrected, is not just about what I call administrative adjustment to the exchange value of your currency, which is what we have done in this instance. Now, I made the argument then that devaluing the naira will not increase the volume of FX in the market. And that's the reality we are facing today. Now, IMF is coming to tell us that there is low investor confidence. Whereas one of the arguments they made then was that if you devalue your currency, there will be inflow from foreign investors. Now, which indeed is a fallacy in argument. Because really, the sentiment of foreign investors is not driven by the exchange value of your currency. There are many other considerations. So that is why I talked about transformation with integrity. Until those changes are made that can spur the confidence of investors, they won't bring in their money here. And that brings us back to the structure of the economy. So which means we should be talking actually about sector strategies. What should we do to critical sectors that will enable us to produce more? It's a two-pronged attack. First is to attack what you need the FX to buy, which is those imports. Then the second one is to boost your exports. That is what you said to the rest of the world.
But you see, a lot of times, sorry to jump in here, people don't really know what they want from what they need.
That's right.
A lot of times we act like we want this. Yeah. We want,
That's
but
right.
not what we need. Now, you've talked about focusing on critical sectors of the economy. We know for a certainty that if we pay more attention to the manufacturing sector, it will solve more than half of the problems that we're having in this country. But it is still, what do we want as against what we need?
Now, and I like this perspective you brought up, very, very important and fundamental too. And this is the way it goes. Now, if you look at the budget of this year, because I've had people express the opinion that this government doesn't have a clear policy direction, which also tells me that such people are not looking at what they should be looking at. If you look at the budget for this year, it is very clear in that document. The government says you are going to put attention on agriculture, on manufacturing, on solid minerals, on SMEs. And of course, we will not neglect oil and gas as well. Now, that is very clear in that document. Now, to me, that is a clear economic direction. Now, the next thing is, if they are going to do that, I should see that reflect in the allocations to critical infrastructure and all those things that will enable those sectors to thrive. So, and I looked in again at the budget, and I saw a huge allocation to the infrastructure, the key infrastructure ministries, power, works and housing, and then transportation, especially those two. Now, when I looked at those two, it told me that, yes, this is the direction we should be moving. In fact, I've always made this argument that what China became today, Nigeria has the potential to become that. But that is only on one platform. And that platform simply is, as much of the resources available to you, which deals with the issue of what we want, as you said, vis-a-vis what we need. We should now begin to put it in terms of developing an infrastructure. And it's a very simple one. Simple to say, but difficult to execute without a commitment. And the way it goes is, China is 10 times the size of Nigeria in terms of land mass. Now, what did China do to infrastructure? They built roads, they built railway, then built ports, both seaports and dry ports. So Nigeria can do the same thing. If I can site my factory anywhere in Nigeria without any worry about I am moving my raw materials and move out the finished goods, and I don't have to worry about people coming to take whatever I have on offer, then I can put my factory anywhere in the country. Now, if we develop infrastructure to that extent, then we can energize manufacturing. Equally, agriculture, we go in the same length because every piece of soil in Nigeria is fertile, and you can easily cultivate one thing or the other, either for domestic consumption or even something that is in huge demand globally, which will, of course, help foreign exchange earnings. Okay? All of this tied together. So what the government should be paying attention to now is clearly what do we want. And I think also the government must do this. They were under tremendous pressure to devalue the naira. But if the government itself is clear as to what it wanted, it wouldn't have buckled under that pressure to devalue the naira. And if they had done that, we probably today wouldn't be talking about, oh, if they had done it a year earlier, we shouldn't have been in the situation we are. That is what the proponents of that argument are now saying. And that is not really the issue here. The issue is if you devalued last year or devalue today, would that bring foreign exchange on the table? It won't.
Dr. Adedikpe, so looking at the budget,
yes,
and looking at the aspects you mentioned, it shows that the government has a clear plan with regards to what it wants to do with the economy.
That's right.
Now, there's been a lot of talks. Some say that at this time the government should put together a crack team, a team made up not just of, those in the government, yes, but from the private sector as well. I might have a different perspective from you as I'm in the government and you're in the private sector.
That's
and you
right.
have a different idea of how a certain plan should be executed.
Yes.
So is that what we need right now? Because or we should just stop talking. It seems as if we're always all about talk and never any action.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that suggestion, that the government should have an economic management team that includes people from the private sector. And this is my reason for it. Now, what governments do is to formulate policies. The real people that execute are in the private sector, not the government. And what I mean simply by that is this. Government comes up with a policy, this is the direction we want to go, and these are the provisions we have. Now, when they begin to implement it, so to say, it is the way the private sector, the people outside there, respond to that policy that will determine whether to be successful or not. So you need such input, therefore, in policy formulation. And that is why it's important to have an economic management team that is a combination of both the private and public sector. Now, the fear expressed by top government functionaries that, oh, we don't want private interest to filter into our policies.
And cloud the issues as well.
And cloud the issues, I think is a fear unfounded. Because really, let's face it, those in government today, some were also on this side of the table before. So all we are just saying is that, look, those on this side today are in it. And so what we feel in doing business is an input they require. In fact, let me also mention here that every time you see IMF come around and they come up with their report, it's not that they sit in their office. What they actually do is that they talk to government functionaries and they talk to private sector people before they come up with their opinions. So it's not something they do on their own within their office. So if we are going to run our economy, therefore, we need input from both sides. And that's the way we can take this from where we are.
Dr. Adedikpe, please hold on to your thoughts. We'll come back to just quickly wrap up this conversation. Welcome back. Dr. Adedikpe is still here with me in the studio as we wrap up this conversation now. Dr. Adedikpe, thank you so much for sticking around. So we know the issues. We've talked about the possible solutions. And looking at we're in the second half of the year, what's your projection?
Well, my projection is that we're likely to see in the fourth quarter a reversal of the downturn we have seen in the second and expectedly this third quarter. And my reason is simple. We have started spending now on infrastructure projects. That brings some injection into the economy. Of course, not minding the inflationary implications of that, which of course is an argument in economics. So we live with that, but focus on renewing infrastructure so that we can re-energize the economy. Given that, I expect a fourth quarter that will not be as dismal as we had in the second and expectedly this third quarter.
Very positive. Thank you so much, Dr. Adedipe, for coming on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me.